Hi everyone. Welcome to our LA County Library virtual event, Tough Topics for Parents, Cannabis Edibles. I'm Will Ruiz, a librarian for LA County Library, and I'll be your host. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes and announcements. As noted here on our welcome screen, cameras, mics, and viewing attendee list are disabled to ensure everyone's privacy. If you're having any audio or video issues, please try to adjust your settings by clicking the microphone or camera icons. You can also call and listen over the phone while you watch. The toll-free number is listed on your screen, and I'll be placing that info in the chat in just a bit. Please place any questions you have for Albert Molina and Tomas Robles in our chat, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. But first, our land acknowledgement. The County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Kizh, and Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including, in no particular order, the Fernandino Tataviam Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California Tribal Council, Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians Kizh Nation, Yuhaviatam of San Manuel Nation, San Fernando Band of Mission Indians, Coastal Band of Chumash Nation, Gabrielino Tongva Nation, and Gabrielino Tongva Tribe. And now to officially welcome our presenters, Albert Molina and Tomas Robles of the San Fernando Valley Partnership. Albert Molina is the Executive Director of the San Fernando Valley Partnership, Inc., and a public health leader with more than 30 years of experience in substance abuse prevention, public health policy, and environmental strategies grounded in the Strategic Prevention Framework. He has designed and managed federal and county initiatives that have earned local and national recognition, including projects that address youth access to cannabis, alcohol, tobacco, and emerging hemp-derived products across Los Angeles County. Albert also served as the regional trainer with UC Berkeley's Center for the Study of Social Change, helping grassroots coalitions use data, policy, and community organizing to prevent underage drinking and other drug use. Tomas Robles, a native of San Fernando Valley and graduate of UC Berkeley, is a leading expert in drug trends, environmental prevention, and community-level public health strategy. For the past 6 years, he has played a pivotal role at the San Fernando Valley Partnership, where he leads 3 major prevention initiatives funded by Los Angeles County Department of Public Health, Substance Abuse Prevention and Control. Known for his deep understanding of emerging drug markets and regulatory gaps, Tomas is driving impactful change to reduce youth access and strengthen local policy and promote healthier, drug-free environments across Los Angeles County. We want to thank you both so much for joining us today, Albert and Tomas, and I will hand things over to you.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all and really talking about this important topic that really is impacting our communities, as we will see. I just want to make sure that everybody can see my screen. Perfect. So we want to talk about the dangers of cannabis edibles and really understanding the risks associated with the edibles, what we're seeing in terms of counterfeit or gray market products, and how we talk to our young people about the risks and the dangers. And I'll tell you, for me, I'm going to start with a video when we first really learned about the impact that edibles were having, and it was really pre-Prop 64. A school principal had reached out and said, "Hey, Albert, I have a question for you. Can kids overdose on marijuana?" And this was back in 2015. And I said, "Look, I haven't seen any research around it, so I really can't tell you anything I can't back up with data." And he said, "Well, hey, you need to come to my school." So here is his story.
How dangerous is an overdose? Paramedics were called to this Pacoima school when a student passed out after eating marijuana-laced brownies. The director will never forget what the EMT said.
At that moment, they state, "We're losing her," and had to perform CPR. My heart dropped.
The partnership wants the word out to children to shun any candy that is not sealed in its original package. But it is teens who overdose more often, according to Dr. Stephen Kishinev.
I think a lot of people that are ingesting marijuana are waiting for the effect. And while they're waiting for the effect, they feel like there's not enough effect, so they take more.
The concern now, as marijuana is popularized,
We're going to see more kids coming out with overdoses.
So it's important to recognize, though, that was an extreme event. So when they said that she really was in trouble, what happened, it was a 10th grader, a petite young girl who ate a brownie. So what happened, he gets called up to the classroom. There's a student in convulsions. He thought she had taken drugs. He asked the students, what did she take? And they said, no, she ate a brownie. And he's like, that doesn't make sense. One of the students brought him the wrapper. So she had eaten a brownie that had 500 milligrams of THC. So just to put that into context, under the provisions of Prop 64, edible products can't be sold that contain more than 100 milligrams of THC with 10 milligram doses. So technically, an adult dose of cannabis is about 10 milligrams of THC. So you had a young girl who ate an entire
how
brownie.
dangerous is an over?
Excuse me. A young girl who ate a brownie and really got in trouble. So it really is important to understand that, really reading the packaging, understanding how much THC the products contain, and making sure that that product is coming from a reliable source really is important. We're not here to vilify the cannabis industry. Cannabis is legal for adults 21 and over. Unfortunately, what's also happened is we also have the underground and gray area market that's also more than anything contributing to these problems. In terms of cannabis, I think it really is also important that cannabis isn't the same cannabis that those of us adults grew up with. It's not the same cannabis of the 60s, 70s, 80s, or even the 90s. It has changed quite a bit. And these were one of the first videos that Tomas and I had looked at that really did a good job of kind of contextualizing the emerging cannabis. Oh, excuse me, I think we're at.
How dangerous is an overdose?
Oh, I'm sorry. This thing's, I think it's our screen here. But I'll get to that. But here we go. Before we get started, too, when we mean edibles, we're talking about products that are infused with THC. And it's also important to recognize that it's not when some of us older folks think about ground up leaves baked into products. Edibles are made with cannabis concentrates, which is going to make it right there more potent. Smoking cannabis and consuming cannabis concentrates are two different levels of THC. So when you're, looking at cannabis edibles, they are made with cannabis concentrate. I'm not sure, Tomas, would you like to add a piece on that?
Yeah, and that's the concerning part. I mean, oftentimes when we see something that's either sold on the street or on regulated spaces, we may not know what percentage of THC is in those products. So an individual, whether that's a young person or even an adult, they may be consuming a higher amount without knowing, how much is actually in that product. So with the edibles, it's definitely a tricky subject when it comes to the illicit or underground market, and specifically the products that are being found in these unregulated spaces, right?
Yeah, and the dynamic has changed. Now there's even cannabis infused drinks, and we'll get a little bit more into the actual products themselves and what they're made of. So this is the video I was going to show you that really kind of contextualizes how cannabis has evolved.
Today's marijuana is not Woodstock weed.
I'm trying to snatch my crops.
It's not even Cypress Hill weed. That was in the 90s, in case you were wondering. Decades of plant breeding for high THC content mean that some strains are more than 5 times stronger than in the 1970s. To understand why that's important, let's look at what weed does to your brain. This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. But instead of frying pans, let's use neuroscience. Simply put, cannabis contains cannabinoids, about 85 of them. Many users may have heard of the big one, THC, or delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol. It's the compound that produces the high, and it does that by binding to receptors in your brain and interfering with how your brain's nerve cells work. Users feel buzzed because there are high concentrations of these receptors in the areas of the brain responsible for memory, coordination, movement, and pleasure. The result? Suddenly the world seems a little different. Reaction time is slower, judgment is impaired, and while some find this experience pleasurable, others have reported severe effects like increased heart rate, anxiety, and paranoia. And some studies say exposure to THC as a teen may even increase your risk of developing schizophrenia. That brings us to pot's lesser known cannabinoid, cannabidiol, or CBD. It doesn't have the same street cred as THC, likely because it doesn't get you stoned. Some research suggests CBD helps tone down THC's extreme effects, like anxiety or paranoia, by minimizing its effect on certain receptors. Researchers are even looking into using CBD as a possible treatment for schizophrenia. We tested 12 popular strains from dispensaries in Toronto and found weed that had no CBD at all. That's because when you crossbreed weed to increase THC, the levels of CBD can drop. Is it worth freaking out about? Well, maybe. THC potent strains can hit inexperienced users pretty hard. In Colorado, weed-related hospitalizations quadrupled after the state greenlit retail pot sale.
So we referenced Colorado. Colorado's further ahead of California in terms of legalization. So it was interesting to see what Colorado experienced with legalization, increased incidence. And remember, when he's talking about just the smoking cannabis, cannabis edibles are made with cannabis concentrate, so it's going to be even more potent. And we'll get into the why we're concerned about the actual products themselves. But we're all here because we're concerned about our young people, our kids, and why it's important to really make sure that they understand the risks and that we as parents also understand the risks associated with underage cannabis use. So we know that the brain doesn't fully develop until they're 25. So what happens in science is making really making that connection between early use and specific mental health issues. It interferes with brain development. So we really do need to make sure that our young people are informed, and even accidental consumption is an issue that we're seeing. So, we're not here to make a moral judgment on cannabis use. Our concern is that there are scientific, dangers associated with underage cannabis use. And I'll tell you, the other side of all of this is that edibles really have changed the dynamic in terms of how they've reduced the perception of harm. And we're going to get into that. So I just think our main purpose here is that we definitely understand the risks associated, its impact on young people, the developing brain, its connection to mental health issues, and really making sure that our young people receive factual information. So as we're seeing here, we're definitely seeing that, and especially now with more potent cannabis, the effects are much more profound. So it has been linked to mental health problems in teens, such as depression and anxiety, which is interesting because, we often hear that teens use it to deal with anxiety, but what science is finding that the more potent, the more it contributes to stress, anxiety. And a perfect example is when first responders go to schools, they're not going for a cannabis overdose. They're going because a student is having a panic attack, difficulty breathing. So that potent cannabis really can have a profound effect on young people. Tomas, I'm not sure the incidents when we were literally at schools.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times, I mean, what we've seen specifically with the youth is that because the products are so potent, is that they may have side effects that mirror a psychotic episode. Also, in terms of the information that's typically communicated or misinformation, to say the least, is really kind of bad. So sometimes what we're seeing is that it says cannabis will help relieve anxiety and panic attacks, all those things. Unfortunately, with the high doses of this product or THC that we're seeing, it can actually trigger some of those episodes or incidents, right? Just like we saw or we've seen with some of the school campuses, a lot of the times it's multiple students who are consuming these products, and then we have what ended up happening is that they call the ambulance for an episode or anxiety attack or a panic attack, things like that. And most of the times with edibles, it's not just one individual, it tends to be multiple students. So it tends to be a groups of students because they're sharing these products, right? And as we'll see a little bit later down the line, most of these products contain very, very high doses. It's multiple, more than one dose than is typically recommended for an adult or an individual. So if a minor is taking it or somebody who's inexperienced, they're definitely gonna have these side effects that may be triggered by these products.
Yeah, no, and it's often gummies, and I think it's important to really recognize that, vitamins now come in gummy form, Tylenol, other medications come in gummy form. So for kids, it's just simply a gummy. It's not something they're smoking. It's not a pill, it's a candy. And I think that's why it's really important to understand that it's not like a good or a bad student kid issue. Again, it really is uninformed, kids being uninformed. And remember, the teen years are a time of risk taking. We are designed to take risks. Unfortunately, when these products are easily available, it's definitely an issue. And this is for us, once again, what our schools are seeing.
An investigation is underway after 5 students at Northridge Middle School had to be treated after eating what could be marijuana-based edibles. Happened today at Noble Charter Middle School on Tampa Avenue. An investigation underway after more than a dozen students at a local middle school had to be medically treated after consuming some sort of substance. Fellow students and parents, they are on edge.
It was a 911 call from the school at about 10 this morning. 17 students here at Walter Reed Middle School had some type of overdose symptoms. Officials say it appears they ingested something that looked like candy. 2 students had to be taken to the hospital.
So I think when we always get the question, why is it always so many students? And that's simple. That's just simply a bag of gummies, one package of gummies, 1 or 2. And kids are simply sharing. Oftentimes they're curious. They don't understand dosage. They don't read the package and they just want to try it. And usually what happens, they'll eat one and they wait 30 minutes, 40 minutes, don't feel anything, and they consume another, and it ends up getting them in deep trouble. So, what we really want to focus on today is the importance of talking with our teens about the risks and potential harms associated with these edibles. And with that, for us to make sure that, we all in this session understand and have clear evidence-based information and strategies, and to help elementary, middle, and high school students understand the risks associated with edibles. And I think in terms of best practices, it really is important, especially in states where cannabis is legalized. It's just more people have it in their homes. So naturally, it's going to be more accessible. If somebody has it at home, has older siblings, parents consume, it's more likely kids can find it, take it to school, and share it. And I'll tell you, when we first started getting calls from elementary schools, at first I would start off by saying, look, it might be a little young to start talking about it. We don't want to stimulate curiosity, and principals would cut us off mid-sentence, and they would say, hey, I know what you're going to tell me, but we have already had incidents on campus. And I'll tell you, it didn't take me long to find a news story about a school here in California.
Several Escondido Elementary School kids are recovering after eating what officials say were marijuana edibles.
The 3rd graders were hospitalized today. CBS 8's Jasmine Ramirez spoke with local parents and a pediatrician about the dangerous effects cannabis can have on young children.
It happened to 4 3rd graders here at North Broadway Elementary School. And now school officials are warning parents about the risks of students mistaking cannabis products for regular food items.
It's really concerning for me personally.
Tonight, parents in Escondido voiced concerns after hearing the news.
Just to have that in schools for that young of age is very, very scary.
The district says the students felt sick after consuming food that may have contained THC. They went to the school nurse, then first responders were called, and the students went to the hospital. The number of kids who have accidentally consumed marijuana has grown dramatically in recent years.
In the past 3 years, we've seen an 800% increase in the number of young children who are accidentally ingesting cannabis products because they're mistaking it for normal food.
And you'll see when we start to look at some of the packaging, why it's so easy for kids to accidentally take it. At this age, it really must have been somebody found a package, a brother, a sibling, parent, brought it to school and shared it with kids. So again, because we're in a state where cannabis is legal, more people may tend to have it in their home. So for folks who legally consume it, really is important to make sure that it's not easily accessible. But I'll tell you, we are seeing the ages get younger in terms of kids accidentally consuming, but there's also the dynamic with the older elementary school age kids, the fifth graders, where they find it and curiosity and they want to try it. I think with gummies, again, it's not a drug. It's simply a candy. So when we talk about the role that access and availability play, it definitely is a key contributing factor. So when you look at these products, at first glance, it just looks like a package of Mike and Ike and gas heads. But as you look closer, you will see the decal for cannabis, the California with the cannabis decal, how much THC this has. What should be even more alarming is that these are counterfeit products. There is no such company, the cannabis arm of Mike and Ike or gas heads. This is all counterfeit packaging that you can purchase in downtown LA. And what happens is people make their own product, package it up to make it look legitimate, and sell it. So the concern is that we don't technically know how much THC the products can contain. And what's even more alarming is chances are the cannabis that used wouldn't pass state testing and the product wasn't tested, period. I know, Tomas, that was something you were looking into early on.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the concern with a lot of these products, right? I mean, you don't really know what's in them, so a lot of folks you're really taking a risk, right? And that's the big concern with anything that you're consuming, or folks that are using these concentrates. That's the big thing. It's a lot of unknown product, and with specifically even in some of the licensed markets, we've heard some concerns about potentially pesticides or fungus, things like that. So it really has been a concern, and with the illicit market or in the under unregulated market, it's even a greater concern, right? And like Albert mentioned, with the different packaging that's out there, folks are really kind of just packaging up, purchasing the product, making their own stuff, and then replacing it for what we see there. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, Albert did mention the dosages, right? The amounts of 600 milligrams of THC, but we don't really know if it's 600 milligrams of THC. It might be more, it might be less, and that's the other risk that folks are taking, right? They're consuming something that may be extra potent without really without really knowing what's in that. So it's the pesticides, it's the mold, it's the fungus, and also the potency that may vary in these products as well.
And I think, again, once it's out of its packaging, you don't know what it is. And I think the innocence is part of the dangers as well. Kids are going to share, and it looks like candy. I think that's where us as parents, we need to be more vigilant in terms of these packagings, whether we have somebody in our home that consumes these products, or even just making sure that our kids know, hey, look, I mean, we definitely are in a time right now where it'd probably be safer not to accept candy from other kids. So in terms of how legalization, how access and availability do impact the likelihood of kids using. And what we do know is access doesn't just mean physically nearby. It also signals that this is normal. It's not serious, right? So we're not trying to vilify the industry, but I think it's important to understand that when kids see it advertised, they see it promoted, it definitely does reduce their perception of harm. And recent studies do show that less risky young people perceive any substance to be, the more likely they are to use it. So it really is important to understand that easy access equals normalization. Normalization is really no big deal. So we think kids think it's no big deal. It's just fun. It's just a gummy. They're more likely to use. And I think it's important because their brains are still developing. And I think that's an important piece and why we're concerned. And I think on the other side of it, why we as a community, as parents, really need to do both. We need to make sure that we're talking to our kids about the dangers, but also pay attention to what's going on in our communities. What we found years back was smoke shops were selling illicit cannabis. So they were literally illicit cannabis dispensaries hiding in plain sight. And that's where we found a lot of these counterfeit products that we're going to show you in a bit. And the other side of access and availability is the internet. There's definitely a key source There was a watchdog group that found that Instagram was still generating hashtags for people that were selling illicit substances. And we've known for years that access and availability of drugs are key contributing factors to substance abuse. So it really is important to educate our young people, but also be aware of the world that they're living in, what they're looking at. And I'll tell you, recently, I think it was last week, a group of students showed us a site where kids were having products delivered to the school, and it does happen. Sometimes we think, oh, that can't be true. It happens. We've had a parent bring a bag of cannabis that was delivered to his son at their home who was a minor. So it does happen. So I think it's important that we do both, educate our young people, but also keep an eye on this. And I'll show you here some of the products. So this is, and Tomaso kind of break down into the M30s, the fentanyl laced counterfeit pills, but you also have a lot of these other edibles, and it goes beyond the THC cannabis products.
Yeah, we've been hearing a lot of discussions also around the mushroom products, whether it'll be the psychedelic mushrooms or even some of the mushrooms that we're seeing at locations like smoke shops. Some of my work does entail visiting and kind of learning a little bit more about the evolving landscape, right? So part of that is some of these new products, whether that be products like Delta 8, which we'll talk a little bit more about, or the mushrooms, whether that's psilocybin or even the amanita mushrooms that are available at a lot of these locations is definitely a concern. But there seems to be a big trend growing right now around psychedelics and a lot of these intoxicating products that unfortunately sometimes are found at locations like smoke shop or online, right? Online definitely becomes another source of availability for a lot of individuals. So as parents, it's definitely important to have these conversations early on to avoid the misinformation that's often communicated through social media or other online forums. So the more you can communicate the facts, the better that will be. And then one of the big products that we have been seeing has been Delta 8. I mean, as you may have seen a little bit in the other slide, I mean, we have seen a lot of hospitalizations, particularly associated around Delta 8. So Delta 8 is another chemical in the cannabis plant. So what we were seeing is that in 2018, a law was passed that basically allowed for a lot of these CBD products or CBD products to be manufactured through hemp-derived plant. And then we started to see is a lot of these Delta 8 products popping up from these CBD derived products or from the hemp plant, right? So a lot of folks started consuming those products, and unfortunately, we did see a lot of hospitalizations due to that product. Now we are starting to see a little bit more regulation, but unfortunately, these products, like the edibles that you see right here on the left side, are still very common in a lot of locations like smoke shops. So it definitely is, and there is a need for further regulation and to really pay attention more to these products that are being sold at these locations as well.
Well, it's important when we think of cannabis, legalized cannabis in terms of what gets you high, it is the Delta 9. Delta 8 is a hemp-derived cannabinoid that has gone through a chemical process to make it intoxicating. And early on, we first started to see it sold at smoke shops, and then we started to see the impact that it was having, the emergencies. 39%, I think it was 258 out of 661 cases involved pediatric patients that had eaten edibles. So that was really folks that had left it out. And I think oftentimes with Delta 8, it was promoted as like the light weed, but when you consume it, the effects are just as bad. So we'll get into why that is. This is just more packaging, just to show you the diversity of products. You have these little cones, chocolate infused cones. Unfortunately, when you look at this is 600 milligrams, so definitely not compliant with Prop 64. These are the 30 milligrams per gummy. So technically, one of these small gummies is enough for 3 adults. So that's the concern, not just simply the products, it's the amount of THC that they have. So either Delta 9 or Delta 8. You have the Oreo cookies, and I'll tell you, I think one quote that we saw, if there's any kind of edible product, there's chances are there's a cannabis version of it. So whether you're talking gummies, you're talking licorice, cookies, I mean, pretty much there is an edible version of it. And remember now, it's important to understand that with cannabis and legalization, there is a competition, better product, more THC. So there's definitely a concern in that realm. But I'll tell you, these products really make it easy for a young person to unknowingly consume these products. And that's why we really want to make sure that we're looking at packaging. We're making sure that even I'll tell you, as adults, we've heard adults accidentally consume. They were at a party and somebody brought out edibles and they didn't read the package and they ate, one gummy, they waited, nothing happened, they ate another one. And it really is, important to understand that even an adult who really doesn't understand the dynamic, the process can get into trouble. But we're definitely concerned because of the high levels of THC. And even more dangerous is products, acquired outside of a licensed facility are even more dangerous. So, and that's the thing when we think about it, a teen, a young person isn't going to walk into a dispensary to purchase, compliant cannabis products. So chances are they got it on the street or online, which probably more likely than not is not a product that would be sold at a licensed dispensary. And that's really the concern and why we want to make sure that we're all aware of the type of products that are flooding our communities, and at the same time make sure that we're talking to our kids. The other dynamic I think that's important to understand with edibles, unlike smoking or vaping cannabis, it takes much longer for the effects to feel the effects. And that's because when you eat cannabis, it's processed by the liver. Well, that whole process converts the delta 9 or the delta 8 into 11 hydroxy. So when you're eating an edible, the liver turns it to 11 hydroxy, which makes the high much stronger and lasts a lot longer. So for teens, it's important to understand that means deeper impairment, more panic, and a higher risk of addiction. We're starting to see now that the earlier you start using with the more potent cannabis, there's a higher likelihood of developing a cannabis use disorder. But it's really important to understand that dynamic. So, with adults or young people, when you're eating it, the effects are going to be much stronger and much longer lasting. So a lot of the panic attacks sometimes come because they're so intoxicated. And I know that's something you were kind of looking into, right, Thomas?
Yeah, no, that's the thing. So there's definitely so much of the product that the individuals consumed, and that's why, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, it's not just one student. It tends to be groups of students, right? Because the product is so potent, the individuals are consuming so much without actually knowing that they end up being hospitalized. And the issue with that is that, it's often documented as a panic attack, anxiety attack. And that's the big issue, right? So individuals typically don't know the doses specifically with the unregulated or illicit product, right? And then with the other thing, if folks are consuming these unregulated cannabinoids or specifically like the Delta 8 or any of the other products, it definitely becomes a bigger concern because those can be processed and definitely converted to a stronger chemical in our body. So if a person is consuming a lot, that means that the intense will be delayed and it will be stronger at the end of the day when it does hit the individual. So just whether that's a minor or an adult.
Here's just another news story, and that goes to show how prevalent this is.
They often look and taste like candy, but for kids, cannabis edibles aren't a safe sweet to eat.
Unlike adults, where they would mostly get high, maybe a little bit drowsy, when young children ingest edibles, they may become very, very sick.
This physician and researcher has treated children with serious cannabis poisoning.
We've seen kids with seizures, kids who stopped breathing, kids who were brought in coma and needed mechanical ventilation in the intensive care unit.
I think when you're thinking of that level of intoxication, it may have been a young child that found a package of gummies and ate more than one. And it's just like anything. I think when kids are eating gummies, or even adults, you're not just going to eat one gummy. So if you don't know what you're eating, there's definitely that risk of that level of intoxication. So I'll tell you, it is important to really understand how the emerging landscape and product, diversity of products. So this is not a regulated product. Especially also when you look at the packaging, because it would be attractive to young people. It is a product that's popular with kids, the high C. I mean, this is literally high C. Unfortunately, it has 600, it says that it has 600 milligrams of THC, but That's really the concern, just the level of product, the level of availability that really, kind of should make us all more vigilant and just make sure that we're talking to our kids. So that really is probably the most important part and why we should be concerned with edibles. And that's not to disregard vaping and a lot of these other products. That is another discussion in and of itself in terms of how these products are made, how kids are getting them. And this is a Delta 8 products. If you see it, I mean, this is more than anything, looking at the package on first glance, it just looks like a regular candy. I always see these at 7-Eleven. Every time I see them, it reminds me of this presentation. But the actual sticker on the side is a home printed, sticker that has the Delta 8. So they purchased the packaging and then just slapped the Delta 8 sticker. They even add a QR code to make it look legitimate, but there is no company at all manufacturing these products. This is all counterfeit packaging, and it's not even counterfeit because there's no company. So it really is designed to just pass off a homemade product as a legitimate product. This is again, for me, it's important that we back up really what we're saying with the research. And I'll tell you, this is another package, a young kid eating it. So one study found that cannabis use has increased, and they're making that connection with the growing availability of edibles. And it's not blaming edibles; it just has contributed to younger kids consuming or kids experimenting. And all it really is because you're not smoking anything. It's not a pill. It's simply a gummy or a candy. How can it be dangerous? And we also have to recognize with legalization, most kids think, well, it's safe. And I'll tell you, this isn't just a California problem. This is a national problem. This is the Wall Street Journal in 2022 published a whole series in terms of talking to kids about gummies as use booms. And once again, there's a number of reasons. It can also be a discreet way of consuming cannabis. So for the adults as well, it's become a way of discreetly consuming cannabis. For kids in schools, it definitely makes sense. There's not going to be one, you're not going to smell it. It's easy to hide. And that's really why it's important. But unfortunately, the concern is because it takes longer to feel the effects, kids can accidentally eat more than they should. Adults as well. So we've seen emergency room admissions for adults increase as well. But kind of bringing it back to Prop 64, we're definitely not blaming Prop 64, but it's important to understand that most of the products that you've seen here and we're talking about did not come from a licensed dispensary. In terms of what we've seen since the passage of Prop 64, we haven't heard of one case where a cannabis dispensary was selling to kids. It's not going to happen. What tends to happen is an adult can be, a little careless with their products, leave it out, kids find it. Older siblings may have it, leave it out. So it just is important. But we just wanted you to see under the provisions of Prop 64, must be sold in 10 milligram serving, and the package cannot contain more than 100 milligrams total. So this is what you have here in terms of a compliant product. It's got the decal, it's got, 100 milligrams total. Each gummy contains 10 milligrams. So again, for an adult, this is how you should buy it within the recreational use. So that's an important piece. So those are the requirements. Unfortunately, when you look at these other products, that really is the concern. As we keep talking about, this product hasn't been tested, hasn't been evaluated, and the dosage can go either way. And I think for us, that's really the critical focus that, I think finally we're getting action on Delta 8. The state has taken action to make sure that these products aren't sold. Unfortunately, though, we're still finding it at locations that shouldn't be selling it, but it's important to say if you see a package, especially within the recreational location, anything that has above 100 milligrams shouldn't be sold. So that's an important piece. And I think the other side of this conversation is teens are getting mixed signals. It really is important to understand that they're getting conflicting information. They learn about cannabis through social media, and definitely, and oftentimes that could be, I think I saw one study where most of the messaging around cannabis on social media is positive, or it could be cannabis industry advertising or folks talking about the health benefits. For a lot of young people, we hear that it's a coping mechanism, that it calms their stress. So, or the other side of it, when we try to demonize cannabis. So, that's the scare tactics we've learned over the years that backfired. As much as we think that scare tactics do work, they backfire. So it really is important that when we're talking to young people, that we simply are providing factual information. So if you can email us, or maybe we can put in the link, there is a parent talk kit from the California Department of Public Health that really has good information in terms of guiding you through that conversation. So that's an important piece. Prevention education is critical. By raising awareness and providing factual information, it makes it easier to really have those conversations with young people. So it really is important that we're fostering productive conversations. I think kids know when we try to preach or tell them that it's dangerous, don't do it. It really is important that we educate them, that we also listen. So we'll talk a little bit about that piece. As parents, as hard as it is to believe, research shows that you are the number one influence on your child's behavior. So what we say and do matters. So it's also important to recognize that we don't talk about it. Your kid might think that it's off topic or off limits. So we need to make sure that they feel safe talking to us about anything. And I'll tell you, it's a hard one. I mean, when we think, hey, look, my son's daughter's an A student, they play sports, they're good kids. It's not about good or bad kids. It's also about curiosity. Again, when you're looking at edibles, it's not a drug, it's just a candy, a gummy. You're curious, your friends tell you it's great, they had a great time. So I think the more we prepare them and actually have these conversations, the better prepared they are to deal with these situations. So that's an important piece. Today's presentation can be a conversation starter. Hey, Jimmy, Janie, I saw an interesting presentation today about cannabis edibles. Do you know what an edible is? Have you heard your friends talking about it? And I'll tell you this, be ready. It might surprise you, and that's why we always say, hey, stay calm. Have you heard your friends talking about it? What have you heard? So I think that's an important piece. So once you start the conversation, though, it really is important to be ready, because they come back and say, well, hey, mom, but it's natural, but it's legal. And I think or the one I heard is, well, doctors grow it. And I think it's just important to say, well, look, just because it's legal or natural doesn't mean it's safe for you to consume. And I think that's when we get into the important piece about their brains still developing and how early cannabis use can impact their memory, learning, contribute to stress and anxiety. So that's an important piece. I mean, the other side, I think we talk about it, as you saw in one of the videos, today's cannabis isn't as natural as people might think. It's grown with chemicals. Unfortunately, some places are still using banned pesticides. There's been genetic modification. So it really the focus of the industry has been to make a more potent cannabis product. And I know, Tomas, there was a whole danger around the specific pesticide, right?
I mean, the with the pesticides, I mean, there's this, but one, I think it's myclobutanol specifically. I mean, it does convert into hydrogen cyanide. So one of the things with that is that if individuals are consuming these pesticides and prolonged periods of time, they're eventually going to see the effect. The other thing is specifically with like certain flavors, right? And that's whether the individuals are vaporizing that or whether they're seeing it in the concentrates, right? That are often put in the edibles. There may be contamination with that, right? So and really think about it. If the plants are being grown with pesticides or are in improper conditions, then that transfers over to the final product, which may be a product that's ultimately contaminated and may have health impacts on the individuals as well, right? So something to keep in mind as well for folks who are maybe purchasing products off of the illicit market, or even for the youth, right, that often don't understand these consequences that are associated as well with the consumption of these products too.
So it's also important when talking about cannabis edibles, really the unique risks. It's also important. I mean, they have friends as they get older, they may be in a position, where they're around it, more people. So I think part of it is really focus on the unique risks of these products, the delayed effects, the risk with the potency, and also to listen. Let's listen to them as well. What are their thoughts? What have they heard? Have they heard friends talking about anybody they know having a bad experience? We get that sometimes. And it's also important in terms of the setting. If you're driving in the car and you know you're going to have some time to talk, or if you're working on something together, make sure that you do make it a conversation, and really to be clear that for you, it really is about safety. That I'm here because I'm concerned. I just want to make sure that you're informed and are able to make informed decisions. So I'll tell you, it definitely is an important piece, and specifically with the delayed effects. I mean, the most of the problems, kids are waiting 20, 30, even 40 minutes. And what we've heard is some of these edibles can take up to 60 minutes to appear. And I think that's an important piece. So what we've heard, well, I ate a gummy and it didn't feel anything, so I ate another one, and that's when they get into trouble. So it's definitely an important piece. And I think once we engage in that conversation, and our kids start asking us questions. So there's a whole other piece there where we may not be prepared for some of their questions, but you know what? It's okay to say, hey, look, I don't have all of the information, but hey, why don't we look for it together, or why don't we look at it together? And you'd be surprised. I just don't think we can avoid the conversation, especially with the level of availability that we're seeing. And I mean, if you start looking now as you're driving, you're going to see much billboards advertising delivery. We're starting to see advertising for certain products. It just is, it's a legal product. So with legalization comes marketing, comes promotion. So that's an important piece. So, that's the other side. I do wish sometimes that we could avoid it, and it is a bit challenging, but the more we talk with our young people, the more we listen, the more we educate them, the better informed they're going to be to make those decisions. And that's an important piece. So prioritize. The other side of it is prioritize safety. Let them know that, look, your concern is their safety. If they're ever in a situation where it's a friend or somebody having a bad reaction, it's okay to call dad. Look, I don't want anything to happen to you. I don't ever want you to feel like you can't call me. If you've made a mistake or one of your friends is in trouble, call me or call the ambulance. You're not going to get in trouble. There's a good Samaritan law. So it really is important that we have that conversation. And the other side of it, we expect our kids to say no or to avoid that without really preparing them. So it's definitely important to ask, hey, well, what would you do if one of your friends offered you a gummy? They said, hey, look, it's just a gummy. There's no problem. Don't be afraid. And I think a lot of that is just simply preparing them to say, hey, look, well, my mom or my dad, they don't play. Now I just don't want to take the chance. Or if they play sports, or, just not right now, school's not a place where I want to try that. And I think it's really important, though, that they be prepared to at least have that conversation with their friends. So the information we share with them, they can simply pass along to their friends. Hey, look, I just heard that some of this stuff might not be regulated, that the potency may be dangerous. So I think it gives them a way out without, kind of being accused of being a scared or a chicken. I think what we've always heard with students, well, why did you do it? Well, I didn't want them to think I was scared, and he did it because he didn't want the other kid to be scared. And oftentimes that's just the way it happens. But if we prepare them, they're in a much better position. And I think that's, at the end of the day, we just really want our kids to make safe and informed decisions, and we can help them get there. And I think it's important. The other side of prevention, educating our kids, is definitely important, but education means providing factual information. But as well as a community, we as a community need to make sure that we're also reducing the accessibility and availability of these products, that we're making it harder to use. And I think that's an important piece. Some of our strategies sometimes are a little extreme. This was the school that pulled the doors from their restrooms because kids were vaping in the restrooms, or we're seeing vape detectors in the bathrooms. So I think the other side of it is, let's talk to kids, find out, what they think, where they're seeing it, how are they getting it. So we also need to address the accessibility and availability along with educating our young people. And we do have questions. I think we also have our email addresses. Tomas is trobles@sfvp.org. Mine is amelena@sfvp.org. And we'll take questions. But before I put questions, I just want to put this up here in case anybody wants information. If you or someone you know has a substance use disorder, there is 24/7 help. You can call the substance abuse helpline. We Recover LA is another resource from the LA County Department of Public Health, Substance Abuse Prevention and Control, as well as the national helplines. And the bottom number is the California Poison Control System. They do get a lot of calls, and if you have questions, they can also provide some guidance. So if anybody has any questions, comments.
All right, great. Thank you for all this information, Albert. We do have some questions from the chat, so let me just review them. In part, I can respond to part of this, but there's a two-part question. So one of our questions is if the library offers any similar programs. And to speak to that question, we do offer some similar programs for a teen audience in person at many of our libraries. I'll post a link in the chat to where you can find many of these programs on our website in one place, so you can see which locations are offering in-person substance abuse prevention programs for teens. The second part of that, though, is if you can recommend any other presentations or resources in particular that you'd want to highlight.
Yeah, you know what? Please email me because we're happy to send you the top kit. There's some great information. The county has great information. The California Department of Public Health has great information. So if you can email me, we're definitely happy to share that information with you. So yes, there's quite a, there's a lot more resources now. The talk kit that the state developed is actually really good, but please email us. Just simply say, hey, Albert, I was on the session. Can you please email me any resources? So we're happy to send you.
Okay, excellent. And then I did have one other question. I was wondering if you could possibly speak to resources or where people can go to report suspected unlicensed cannabis businesses or businesses that are selling Delta-8 products.
All right. You want to take that one, Tomas?
Yeah, no, without a doubt. So, I mean, we do work with a group of coalitions that are observing that piece specifically. So, folks are interested or are concerned about a specific smoke shop or location specifically that may be selling Delta-8 products. Feel more than free to contact me, and we can definitely have a conversation about that. And for cannabis-related incidents, there's definitely the state side, but we can definitely walk folks through that or even host a session to better facilitate that process. Sometimes it could be a little bit challenging, so we're definitely here to support and provide that assistance in navigating that piece specifically. So feel free to send us an email, let us know, and we're more than happy to walk you through that process and send you some additional information.
If you're in the city of LA, the city attorney's tobacco enforcement program has an email address that you can submit a complaint to. But if you could email us, it'd be great, because what we're trying to do is track the complaints, whether it's the city of LA or the county of LA, and work with the respective organizations. So there's complaints that we can send to the LA County Department of Public Health and Environmental Health, and we're also sending them to the state. So there's a lot of action going on right now. So there was an emergency order that was just made permanent to regulate or ban the sale of Delta-8 outside of licensed dispensaries. So at least looking at that key source of access. So there's definitely a lot happening right now.
All right, excellent. And so we have their contact information on the final slide if everyone wants to note that. I do also, well, again, thank you both for joining us today. And thanks again to our presenters, Albert Molina and Tomas Robles. I want to mention we'll be posting the recording of this presentation to our YouTube channel in the coming weeks, and I will email this link along with additional resources provided by our presenters to everyone who registered for today's program. We also encourage you to look for more information about upcoming virtual events on our website, lacountylibrary.org, and follow us on social media for the latest updates. We hope you all stay safe and have a wonderful rest of your day.